So before we talk about how each of us deal with it, it's been a while since we talked about overreaching, functional and non-functional forms, and then of course overtraining syndrome. So I was going to approach it from a slightly different angle and just talk about how we balance stress with recovery. And it's basically three scenarios. We either get positive adaptation, negative adaptation, or no adaptation. Mm-hmm. And positive is, I put it in quotes because you think positive adaptation is when I balance stress with recovery, when in fact it's when you eventually restore, when you eventually recover and you restore balance. Mm-hmm. So we're typically in what would appear to be a negative adaptation sort of approach or scenario where stress far outweighs recovery, because we're inflicting a stimuli that tells our system we need greater resources, and recovery is absolutely part of the picture, but we don't really level out until we finish typically a recovery block, that fourth week at the end of a 3-week loading cycle sort of thing. So I kind of want people to get over the fact that we're not always trying to keep stress and recovery in perfect balance. Over the course of a week, stress is higher, and that recovery does not meet, does not balance out. Ideally, by the end of the week, it comes closer to balance so that we can start another week effectively, do it again, run it down a little farther, bring it back up closer to balance. And then finally, we hit that recovery week where we do try to balance things out so that we emerge from that recovery week actually fitter, ready to tackle greater challenges.
The way I always love to think about it is you're revving an engine. Mm-hmm. So you want to rev it higher and higher and higher, and then let it go back down. And every time you rest, it goes back down further. So you're actually traveling further in the stress continuum over and over and over.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay, so with that in mind, I just want to briefly discuss, just to give riders and athletes an idea of what to look for when they think, is this the functional form of overreaching? Is this what I should be feeling? Or is this non-functional? Am I starting to head into those murkier waters where if I keep on pushing, maybe it could become really bad and eventually push me to overtraining syndrome, which carries really hefty consequences. So first off, understand the term acute fatigue. This is what we do with every workout, is we heap on a bunch of fatigue really quickly, and we're tired because of it. That's pretty much always okay. We have to do that. That's a necessary aspect of it. But in terms of achieving proper overload, we have to progress things at the rate in line with our rate of recovery. And that's where it gets really tricky. Because some athletes recover really well, really quickly, just in general. Some athletes recover well after high intensity, whereas other athletes don't. Some athletes can deal with a ton of volume and recover well, whereas other athletes, it takes distinctly longer. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of get a sense for, I'm not like that. I'm not like every other rider, but the signs of overreaching too far are similar across riders, regardless. So when it comes to functional overreaching, which is what we're after, knocking ourselves down to a point where with a bit of rest, we rally and we can handle more work. You might see a decrement in performance over the course of a loading phase, whether it's a week heading into a recovery day or 3 weeks heading into a recovery week. Performance might gradually tick downward, but after resting for, be it a day at the end of a week or a full week at the end of a loading cycle, you rebound and performance starts to tick. It basically returns to baseline or higher.
So this happens a lot in the week where, like the workouts later on in a block are much harder than the workouts earlier. Yeah. And that could actually be a good thing because you're putting yourself in this state.
Absolutely, that's what you're looking for. But recognizing when that good thing starts to sour is the art, is the trick of it all. So what you can watch for in terms of functional overreaching, the kind we're after, the desirable, the positive adaptation, is your mood is pretty steady. You don't get to that point where you're flying off the handle or where you're verging on a bit of depression or anxiety is high, that sort of thing. So mood stable, your immunity and health. You're not getting ill. Yeah. You're not pushing yourself to the point of succumbing to an upper respiratory tract infection or something. And your sleep doesn't deal with disturbances. I mean, as soon as you push into those, the more undesirable, non-functional overreaching, sleep's one of the first things to suffer. It's a little harder to get to sleep. There's more waking episodes. You don't wake up in the morning feeling refreshed.
For sure.
Yeah. Did that happen to you, Pete?
Oh, yeah. I think that's easily the first barometer or first litmus test that I use is if I can't fall asleep as quickly as I normally do. Usually it's like fast enough that I'm not worried.
Yep. And this in and of itself, you don't have to panic. Right? Oh, I just had a bad night's sleep. I think I'm pushing into non-functional overtraining. You don't even have to put a term on it. You think I need to back things off. I'm pushing too hard. Not necessarily. This is when you start watching for repeat occurrences. One night's bad sleep, 2 nights bad sleep, not a big deal. But when it's starting to happen 3, 4, 5 nights in a row, then you know something's up. It's time to dial it back.
You might get excited about that one night. You're like, oh, I'm there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Adaptation's coming. Do you guys ever get night sweats when you on really hard workouts?
Yeah. For sure.
Especially if I do a criterium at night.
Yeah,
but
we call them like race legs or crit legs. But if you race late and your legs are sweating and you wake up multiple times in the middle of the night with your legs either like they feel like they're firing or they're sweaty or your body's sweaty. That's
after our big events like 6-hour lost and found, I'll that night I'll wake up just covered in sweat, totally tired or totally cold.
Emmerich got her first taste of this having done Donner Triathlon. Her sleep was wrecked. She was hot all night. She finally understand why I sleep under a sheet if I sleep under anything at all after I've done hard workouts or a string of hard workouts, because you're just revved. And sleep is impacted, hopefully in the very short term though. So in the case of functional overreaching, with a bit of recovery, and we're talking days to maybe a week, you should be back on track. And if you're not, and this is going to be the outcome of all of these scenarios, you need to adjust. So psychologically, physiologically, there is a rebound. So you undergo functional overreaching. At the end of it, you rest, you come back, you're ready to do it again, legitimately ready, and you recognize it on a number of levels. If, however, you keep on pushing past that point of functional overreaching into non-functional territory, this is where you start to deal with the sleep disturbances we just talked about, where your mood does start to tank. And that can manifest in a lot of ways. I mean, higher anxiety, maybe you're just not as sharp in terms of cognition. Maybe you start to deal with just a bit of depression. We're not talking on a clinical level here, but for some reason you're just down and you can't understand why you can't get back up. You're more susceptible to colds and flus. And interestingly, I just read an article I'm in the midst of a book, really good one, where they draw the line between URTIs and what's called URS. So an upper respiratory tract infection is super common in endurance athletes, right? It happens all the time. But the symptoms for it, upper respiratory symptoms, can actually be present without there being an infection. And those symptoms can have the same impact on performance. So you can have poor workouts without actually having an infection. You can simply be exhibiting these symptoms, not actually be sick, and your performance can tank because of it. And then, of course, you keep on pushing, and you can, contract the virus or bacteria or whatever it is that's trying to challenge your system.
That's crazy.
That is very crazy.
How I think of it is when you're in a block, your Tuesday, let's say Monday's rest day. Tuesday's good and hard. Then we get to Thursday and Saturday and Sunday. I can still complete them, but the RP goes way up for the same wattage.
Yes,
100%.
That's exactly, and that's one of the points. So RP, okay, we'll get to that.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. Jump in whenever.
Okay, I'll do it now. Just kidding. Sorry.
So
more, not to interrupt you.
More non-functional symptoms is fatigue. So a general form of fatigue. So obviously the workouts feel a bit fatigued, but you're also fatigued during rest, and it doesn't really wane. You're just you're tired all the time. General weakness and performance starts to decline. And again, fine line here, right? I mean, you can see a gradual performance decline when you're functionally overreaching. You can also see that same decline when you're non-functionally overreaching, but there's a rebound when it's functional, not so much when it's non-functional.
Maybe on that, it's the time of you're in that state. To be able to
it's all contextual. You have to recognize where you are in whatever cycle, whatever phase of training, whatever point in that phase.
Could work stress and stuff change the amount you could be in that state?
Absolutely. So I used to talk, it doesn't matter what I used to say. Now I see things in terms of training stress and life stress. And life stress is the catch-all for everything that doesn't happen during the 2 hours of the day you train. So it's the other 22 hours, as this actual book puts it, as a lot of clinicians and sports scientists put it. What happens over the course of the other 22 hours makes a huge impact of what you can do over the course of the 2 hours you're training and how you can respond to that training.
I personally think that is such so overlooked, especially by the people who are, we call them the persona data scientists, who they look at their TSS and saying, on paper, it makes complete sense that I should be able to do these intervals. Therefore, I challenge the training system, or my power meter's wrong, or my trainer's wrong, when really
they just keep on pushing.
They had a bad day at work, they had a fight with their spouse, and something else happened, and all of this stuff makes it so much harder to do the workouts.
You have to be adaptive. You have to be flexible. You have to be willing to change things up when you recognize something's going wrong. The challenge is, when do you recognize it's actually going wrong? It's not just a bad day, but you're having consistent bad days, or you're seeing the manifestation of a lot of these symptoms to the point where this is more than I usually deal with. I need to start. Maybe my recovery patch needs to happen now, whether it's days or a week.
Yeah.
So with non-functional overreaching, you have you reach your recovery week, but at the end of the week, you don't emerge fresh and ready to go at it. Although most people will force themselves to anyway, even though they don't feel recovered, they don't feel up to the task. It's on the training plan. It's on my schedule. My coach is expecting it.
Yeah, it's Monday.
I'm going to do it. Yeah, it doesn't matter. So in this state, energy never really comes back. If you have muscle aches and soreness, it persists. It hasn't dissipated. It's not gone. And RPE stays elevated. Everything's harder. If you're starting a new block after a recovery week and everything's harder, that right there is a red flag. I should tell you I'm not up to the task. Those first couple workouts, assuming you get past the initial getting back into it, should feel pretty good. Should be pretty encouraging.
Yeah, exactly.
So these are the signs that I feel like. One is when I am functionally overreaching, or actually this first one is when I think I should back it off, is when I can't concentrate at work. And all you guys should do that too. But you get that where you kind of just stare at the screen and you have like a simple email to write, but it takes forever. That's like a key sign for me that I need to.
I've worked with a lot of people over the years who are bike racers who I don't know why they come to work on Monday. They're basically useless. They just had a big race weekend or a big training weekend, and I see them just staring at their computer screen.
They're like, I did 6 hours yesterday, and you're like, I can tell.
No kidding.
The second one is, this is a little bit more about functional overreaching, is I feel like my allergies get way worse. Like I get inflamed. It just happened this morning. I did three semi-good days in a row. But I breathe in and I want to sneeze.
You're in the midst of an insult to the system, so your immune system is at maybe not red alert, but it's
turned on, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm inflamed from all this stuff, and
inflammation is part and parcel with training stress. So.
Exactly. So those are the kind of the things that I watch for. And if it affects my mood or I can't concentrate, definitely time to take an easy day.
Yeah, and often enough, that easy day goes so far. If it's just like when you recognize, I think I might be getting a cold, and you find a way to tone your stress down for a day. I just take a day off. And I got to say, I haven't been like sick nearly as often as in years past, because I'll see the signs and just take it easy, just in terms of stress and avoiding the stress. It doesn't take hold, and I'm back to work the next day rather than 3 or 4 days later or a week later.
And the big thing is on those rest days to be mentally okay with taking the rest day, because a lot of y'all
really good point.
Are type A people, and you can't take the rest day without stressing out about it. So on the forum, someone just talked about it, about how they have to do things. They don't want to take days off. But I feel like it adds more mental stress, and then you don't actually get the rest that you need.
No, because type A's are typically like in sympathetic overdrive. We don't know how to, even if we don't recognize it, our sympathetic system is elevated. It's always elevated because we're processing, we're thinking, we're worrying, we're stressing. Even if it's a tolerable level, only because we've become accustomed to it, it's not good training. It doesn't allow you to recover.
One of my biggest takeaways is when I was training a whole lot is on rest days, focus on the recovery as your challenge or your workout for the day.
It's training.
It's training.
It's absolutely training.
Yeah. So if you would have spent 2 hours like riding, if you had a 2-hour workout or a 3-hour workout, I would be like, well, I'm going to do 2 hours or 3 hours of stretching, foam rolling, like some core strength, a little
watching movies.
Watching movies.
On the couch,
yeah, but it would be you work just as hard at your recovery as you do at your training. And that's a huge thing that makes your one, if you drop in a day every week or however often you need to do it, if you do it right, man, it's worth tons and tons of overall in your training.
Absolutely, and it lends to a greater level of consistency and high quality consistency too. It's not you're not just getting the workouts done, but you're getting them done well.
Yep.
George Hincapie is famous for this. In some books, and Lance would say that he just, as soon as they get back from a ride, he's like laying on the couch, feet up, and maybe asleep, and asking everyone to bring him stuff. He doesn't want to get up because he knows
at that level.
Well, if you want to perform well, maybe not get everyone to bring you stuff, but instead of, I think someone said, on the days off, I want to go through all my mechanical stuff. I want to like tweak my bike and check everything.
Still very stressful.
Exactly, yeah, and all the things you could do if you just, comedians in cars getting coffee, new season's out. Just watch all that, lay on the couch.
Binge on a season of something.
Yep, it's great.
Okay, so non-functional overreaching, you're in it, you recognize the signs, or maybe you've chosen to ignore them, and you keep on pushing. Eventually, you can push yourself to the point of actually achieving overtraining syndrome. So a number of symptoms, number of aspects of it that are all harmful. Basically, fatigue has become a constant part of your life. So it's not just I feel run down, and you give yourself a couple of days off and it rebounds. You can give yourself a couple of weeks off and you're not going to rebound. It is now part of life, and it's a long, hard road back. Performance obviously tanks. It's just going down, 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 swirling the drain. Greater incidence of illness because your immune system is just in a constantly compromised state. You can actually see muscle loss along with fat gain, so double whammy there. And then you got biological disruptions ranging from affecting sleep, appetite, menstruation in women, neurological imbalances also affecting sleep, but your mood, your libido, your ability to concentrate, and then hormonal dysregulation, everything from testosterone to cortisol, the ratio between the two, adrenocorticotropic hormone, which has to do with I should have made a note. It's a major impact on, I can't remember, I'll have to look it up. Epinephrine, norepinephrine, but either way, you're hormonally out of whack, and it's not going to restabilize anytime soon. So at this point, if you've actually managed to push yourself this far, and we've talked in the past how you actually have to be a pretty high-level athlete to go this far down the rat hole. If you've actually reached this, the road back is at best months, very probably many months, to the point of, I don't know about multiple years, but
you throw away the rest of your season for sure.
Oh, season's gone.
8 months.
It might be the next season too.
10 months.
Yeah.
12 months.
Yeah, and then the road back is a slow, careful one. It's a drag. I've seen it described, and you have to be so delicate with everything you do, making sure you're keeping it on track and you're not pushing yourself back into that state because you're downright fragile.
Have you heard of this happening to people you know?
Yeah, and one of the best stories I have is, I won't say any names, but this guy who was always pretty good, but he trained a ton and rode all the time. And he crashed and broke his arm or something, but a real crash. And he took 2 months off and it was and he came back and he was absolutely flying, right? Like it took, right? He just needed that 2 months of nothing he was way faster after 2 months of not riding than he had been in the previous year or two that I'd known him.
And that might not even be overtraining syndrome. That could just have been non-functional overreaching that he needed recovery from.
Yeah. But even the non-functional side of things where you haven't pushed yourself all the way to actual overtraining syndrome, which is really hard to diagnose, by the way, it can be a long way back. It might not be, I just need an extra week of recovery this time or a couple extra days. It could be a few weeks, a couple months to get you back on track.
With the real chronic or the actual syndrome, everybody who more or less gets that in bicycle racing never comes back.
Career's
it's over,
yeah.
Right?
They either miss their window, or it breaks them psychologically, or
they never
physically
come back.
They just can't get back.
Yeah. So you just don't see them anymore, and it's usually like the under 25-year-olds who are they're capable and they're driven and they have the time and the energy and they do it, and then after a couple of years they just sort of float off. And
it happens often enough.
Triathletes too. These are people doing I'm sure it could happen with less hours, but what I've seen
in general,
20 to 30 hours a week for a long time with intensity.
Yeah, the volume is key. Or if you have overall stress, right?
Yeah.
If you have a super stressful job and you're doing 10 to 15 hour weeks,
sleeping 5 hours a night.
Oh man! And one of the things that I picked up, or that was extremely helpful for me, is as your weeks or your blocks go, prioritize rest more as as your volume increases and your intensity increases, prioritize rest more often.
Recovery in general. So not just the rest side of things, but also the nutrition side of things.
Everything, right? You want to build yourself up to be capable of withstanding this really tough training.
You're building a better human. It takes materials, it takes focus on or attention to all of these symptoms. So to sum it up, regardless of where you are in this continuum, hopefully you're more to the left than the right. When you start to recognize persistent symptoms, that's when you start to take note. A day or two here and there, no big deal. But when it starts to happen recurrently, that's when you start to worry. So if performance is slipping, fatigue's ratcheting up, doesn't seem to be coming down, you can't normalize it after a day or a week of rest, sleep quality is suffering, your mood, and that includes motivation, a bit of depression, your overall stress level. Illness is on the rise. You're a little more susceptible to bugs, or you've got symptoms even. That's absolutely worth taking note of. And then general muscle soreness that doesn't dissipate. And I always think about the times where you talked about how your legs were always sore.
They still
because
are.
I think you
always sore. I'm serious.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't remember last time they were not, before Leadville, they were not sore.
Yeah. So if I were your coach, I would absolutely be concerned about that.
Yeah. And it's much easier. Err on the side of caution with this. If you're considering that you might be closing in on the spectrum, man, just back it off.
Why not be cautious?
Why not be cautious?
Sure, and that's
because we want to be faster.
No, I get,
and we want volume.
Yeah, I understand. It's not the right. It's not
hard
the way
to digest.
Yes,
yep. But it doesn't have to be an about face. You don't have to just stop training or just take a couple days off. You can dial your training intensity down a little bit, shorten the duration of the workouts, so you can just tweak a workout or a couple of workouts. Maybe not even missing the point of it. Maybe a 5-interval workout becomes a 4-interval workout. Maybe a 2-hour weekend ride or a 3-hour weekend ride gets trimmed in half. I mean, it doesn't have to be total neglect of your training. And then nutrition, especially in terms of vegetable and protein intake, because so many endurance athletes get so caught up in carbohydrates, and it's usually refined to some extent that vegetables and all the micronutrients and the fiber and the water that come with them, that goes away. And then protein gets neglected too. And protein is so vital in the recovery process. And then finally, consider recovery as it relates to you. Be super subjective about this, because recovery rates and recovery rates relative to different forms of stress are different. I mean, different for different riders. They're incomparable. I mean, you might meet someone that you have certain parallels with, but I promise you those parallels end at some point. No rider is just like any other rider.
Don't look at a pro. That's me.
Don't even look at your buddy.
I mean, don't even. A good example is if I did back-to-back Baxters, I would be torched, and Nate can do them twice a day forever, pretty much. But if I do 1 hour of on-off 500-watt 30-second ones, I can pretty much do those forever.
Same here. Yeah. So, yep, I'm with you.
Okay.
And we both feel fine afterwards, right? You do a Baxter and you're like,
Baxter's fine. Yeah, I've done a lot. And I think, too, I don't want to let go of the volume. What I try to do is optimize the recovery. And I think there's still, in my life, big gains to be had with recovery, and probably all of our lives. Of trying to reduce stress, better nutrition. I think that's huge. Nutrition
it always blows my mind that people don't prioritize nutrition. Yeah. It's crazy.
But then better sleep.
Well, yeah. And the harder you're trying at training, the harder you should try at nutrition and recovery and rest. All of those things should ramp accordingly. Yeah. Don't sacrifice any of those other things for more training.
They move lockstep.
I'm Nate.
And I'm Pete.
If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up.
If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. If you would have done something differently than we did, tell us about it in the comments below.
And if you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe. If you want to become a faster cyclist, go to TrainerRoad.com and check us out there.
I can't even move you.
What are you trying to do?